All right, so I was asked by Ben to give this presentation on lessons learned through successful app ID and user ID implementation. Tom Addair, I am a professional services engineer for Palo Alto Networks. So essentially, when customers buy professional services and they need help doing greenfield deployments or migrating from a previous vendor's firewall to Palo Alto Networks technologies, I am the one who does that. So essentially, in PS, we kind of have like a risk-adverse methodology when it comes to implementing, app ID and user ID. So this presentation is going to just be a brief overview of lessons I've learned, doing that for some companies. So to start things off, lesson one. Have you guys ever heard of the phrase? It's actually the 7 Ps, but since I was presenting to a crowd here, I had to drop one of the Ps because it's a mild expletive. All right, it's actually a military term, and it was popularized in the British military. So proper planning and preparation prevents, and the 7th P is piss poor performance. Okay, now this lesson right here, I can apply this lesson to not just doing app ID and user ID implementations. You can apply that to any configuration or any feature that you want to apply to Palo Alto Networks. So say you wanted to do SSL decrypt, or say you wanted to implement URL filtering policies. Plan, prepare, test it, make sure that you do your due diligence.
And test it again.
And test it again, exactly. I'll actually get to that later. Read the manual. I'm sure you guys, as IT people, have heard the phrase RTFM many times. It holds true nonstop. Always read the manual. Make sure you get a basic understanding of how to configure something first. If anything is confusing, look up parts that confuse you online, see if anyone else has, maybe better definitions than the official tech documentation. And the other thing too, I cannot stress this enough. Have you guys all taken like the 201 or the 101, the 105 courses? We have ACE certifications in here. No? Nobody? All right, so I recommend take some of like the free education that's available for customers. We have like the 100 level courses. I believe is that true? They're still free for customers?
Yeah, yep. Those ones are. They might have changed numbers because they were combining the what used to be like I think the 101 and 105. So it's maybe a 110 now. I think.
Okay.
But
I'll have to.
It's still free. The 100s are still free.
Yeah. Okay. So the 100 level courses are still free. So I highly recommend go on your PaloAltoNetworks.com page and look up go to the education portal and look up the 100 level courses, because once you do, you will see the picture that I'm going to show you in the next slide. So one of the preparations, at least for user ID, is you want to make the determination what you want to use user ID for. Okay. You can use user ID for 2 things in Palo Alto, and that one is visibility, and the other is enforcement. Okay, like initially when you implement user ID, if you're going to like a virgin environment that has never had user ID implemented, you typically want to do user ID for visibility first. Okay, so what that means is you want to make sure that the user ID information that you're actually seeing coming from your user ID sources is accurate. Because essentially, if you start blocking right out the gate, or you start restricting resources, what happens if your LDAP server logs aren't synchronized across the board, and the Palo Alto firewall is receiving inaccurate information as to who actually is associated with an IP address? Now you've got a user who's trying to access a resource and they can't, so now they're calling up your help desk. You don't want that. So going to the flow logic process here, if you take the 100 level courses, you're going to see this diagram, and you're going to see it a lot. Okay, one of the big like marketing terms that we use for Palo Alto, it's the single pass architecture. So essentially, what this logic flow diagram is showing you is these are all the logic bus processes that happen simultaneously whenever a packet hits the firewall. So there's the initial packet processing. It's looking at the source, zone, address, and it does user ID calculations there. Looks up policy-based forwarding loops, looks at the destination zone, and then it evaluates the NAT policy. Now, all this stuff happens roughly at the same time. But here's the thing. So for app ID, you'll see user ID happens pretty early on in the process. But it really becomes important with app ID, because you'll notice that app ID doesn't really happen until you get to the very end of that process. Okay? Everybody with me so far? Am I speaking Greek? So, user ID can come from several sources. Okay? It can come from Active Directory, Novell directory. If you have a appliance on your network that does 802.1x authentication, we can pull user ID from that. Now there's a list of like official ones that we support, which you will see in this drop-down menu here. This is a screenshot I actually took from my VM50 running 8.0.3. So this should be the most up-to-date list of official syslog listeners or syslog senders that we support.
If you have the Cisco WLC, I know how to get that to work.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
Josh did a really good job on that. As users log into our Cisco wireless, their username and their Active Directory username is in the syslog. So Josh was able to do some fancy magic with regex and pull that out and feed it into user ID. So that way, when users get in the office, they associate to the wireless, user ID is updated. They don't have to go to the captive portal or anything like that. And it was a custom job. Does the same thing at those.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. When I say these are the ones that we officially support, what I mean is those are the ones that we have like a pre-baked, regex and API call for. You can actually make your own API calls, and you can make your own regexes to pull user ID info out of specific sources.
Yeah.
You in particular, you said you use Chromebooks, right?
Yeah.
So if you have Chromebooks, I actually encountered this in a previous customer. So it was a school district, and they were doing the 1.1 initiative, and they had Chromebooks. Now, there's a service that runs on the Active Directory that basically feeds Google information about your AD logins. But the problem is that the Chromebooks use that Google service and they send like a encrypted token back to Google rather than actually pulling that information directly from Active Directory. So to pull user ID info from Chromebooks, it's a bit of a challenge. Some enterprising users of ours actually made a script that pulls that information right out of the browser calls whenever they try to access a website or log into Google. So that script, I believe that's available in the live community, right? Is that public yet? Or? I remember when I first asked you about it, you
I
sharing
sent you
like,
what I had.
yeah, it was a while ago. but again, that basically shows the flexibility of where you can pull user ID info from. If it's 802.1x compatible or it has any kind of user ID info whatsoever in it, we can probably pull info from it. Yes.
What about Global Protect?
Global Protect is the absolute best source of user ID that you can possibly implement in your
That's
environment.
where we kind of want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the reason why I ask is we're implementing always on and then the internal gateway detection.
Yes.
And we've noticed that when you go in and look at user ID, it'll show the source in the command line.
Yeah.
It'll say GP for Global Protect. We've always been told that's the best source you can get.
It is.
And if you have Active Directory and your other, Syslog, you have all these other out there,
yeah.
and then you implement Global Protect. What takes the cake? You know what I mean?
Yeah, what's precedent?
Global Protect, I believe, will take precedence over any other ID source because that's our baked-in solution. That's what we prefer. And the reason that we do prefer it is because Global Protect, you typically install a client on the workstation, right?
Correct.
Now, since that client has local access to the workstation, it is giving you up to the second accuracy when it pulls that user ID information. Now, not only does it pull the user ID info since it's installed locally on the machine, it's also, you can make host information profiles. And you can use hit profiles to get visibility or do enforcement even further.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, sorry.
You can go ahead.
Okay, I was just to tie on to that. With traps, is there a plan to implement, because it's already feeding that info back to the trap server, is there any way to feed that same user ID info back to the rest of the Palo?
Officially, I'm not sure, but I can definitely look into that.
I do know that Traps 4 feeds into Panorama, but
It
I don't know
does.
if it feeds into user ID on the firewall.
It does not yet.
Doesn't yet?
It does not yet. It's.
I'm sure it's on the...
I don't know. I don't go that far. It just does not yet. I don't know anymore. It does not yet.
If
I'll
it's
tell you
going,
what, if enough of you demand it, it will be on the road.
if it can send it to a syslog, you can do a regex filter to
This
figure
is
that
true.
out. So.
If you send it to a syslog, which traps can do syslogs,
You could do that.
and what's required to do that syslog is you have to have user ID and the IP address in that syslog. Like that's got to be in that same syslog
Yep.
message, because that's what it parsed.
Which traps would have that?
If you have that, then you can pull this information. And I also think it's like what you were talking about, Global Protect. There definitely is a hierarchy for user ID. So there's certain things that are better to pull user ID from because they're more accurate. So you start at the top, and it's usually Global Protect. Then you're going to go down to your, let's say you've got a NAC, so you've got ClearPass, or you've got ICE or something like that that's pulling user ID from there, or wireless controllers, or it's anything that's doing like 802.1x authentication, because then you have both the accepts and you have the disconnects. So now we can actually generate, hey, here's this information. We know to create the user ID mapping. We know to tear down the user ID mapping. So both of those are kind of your next layer down. And you can do it not only via syslog, but also via the API. So like a ClearPass or something like that. There's actually API integration. So it's literally a checkbox inside of ClearPass that says, send this to the firewalls. And then it sends user ID information over. And then you go down from there and you can pull your various different logs. So pulling from AD, which is the default one that just about everyone supports, or Exchange servers, things like that.
And the funny thing with AD is it's actually one of the ones that gives you like one of the least accurate user ID
Yeah, it
information
really
systems.
does. And no matter what you try to do, play with to tweak the settings like caching and timeouts, it's never really 100% accurate.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really makes AD like hard to use as a user ID source. So like, say someone is logged into a workstation as a particular AD user. Now let's say they put in a help desk ticket, and now one of the IT admins has to go over there and run a program as someone. Well, now AD just updated, and it said, hey, this IP address just ran an application as this user. So they're the user that has that IP.
Yep.
So now all of the activity from that IP address until it gets updated with another user log out and log back in is going to show the IT admin doing all the downloading all the malware, going to the sites it shouldn't be going to.
That then becomes the problem when you have to explain a internet usage report to HR.
Yeah.
Like, I can't guarantee this is 100% accurate, and that's.
I got another one for you. You have a scanner that goes out and scans your workstations. When it scans the workstation and has any sort of authentication with AD, it will update the ID.
Yep,
user
the
ID.
ignore
So if you
user
have a
list.
service account,
So if
now
you have a
it's-
service account, so this actually happened to me last week. Actually, there's an implementation going on, and someone went out and started scanning workstations. Well, if I went to the firewall and did a show user IP mapping, and I piped to include that service account, it had like 100 accounts associated. So all those users were kicked off everything completely. So I actually had to go through and put that service account in the exclusion. But because it was integrated with AD, that's a brand new service account, they didn't know, and they just started scanning, and it was a bad day.
Exactly.
So the one other thing I was going to add about Global Protect is, if you go with the always on and the internal gateway detection, all that fun stuff, we would like to get rid of Active Directory eventually, because I think that
if we
Global
get
Protect
Global
would be
Protect
the
on
best
everything.
way to get that information. Just rely on that, and if they don't have it, then force them to go through like the captive portal. So you're saying Active Directory is not that good of a source
We've already known
It's,
compared
that.
to other?
it's
yeah.
better than nothing, but
Yeah,
as far
it's-
as like the other sources are concerned, like Ben was saying, NACs are definitely better if you have any kind of 802.1x device on in your environment that authenticates people. I mean, Global Protect is king, and NAC is definitely, I'd say NAC is probably second best, and Active Directory, if you have no other options, just use that.
And then you
But-
guys also have that terminal app, right? For like Citrix boxes.
There is, yeah. There's terminal services user ID too. That
Yeah.
one's okay, but not every environment has that. So
Yeah, we
It's
have
for
that,
the-
and it works fine. You just install a little application on the Citrix Gold image, and then as the boxes spin up, they have this application. And then on your firewall, you have to point it to the IP address of the, I guess, the terminal server.
Yeah.
And then what it'll do is when multiple users are on a Citrix session, they're all sourcing the same IP address, but they have like a port range per user.
yeah.
So it's literally like, I have 8 guys on the Citrix box. They're all using different apps, and the firewall can recognize this guy has internet access, this guy has social media access, this guy has no access. So if you don't do that, the last person to log in to Citrix, everyone's on his user ID. So I don't have internet access, but now I do because this guy logged in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we've learned as well.
Okay.
Because you have to have that on your Citrix.
Yeah, the terminal services app.
That is great information.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking about the traps thing. But if I can I could probably write a script that can do that. Pull that out of the traps stream, I was going to say stream.
Traps does syslog forwarding, so you
Yeah,
can,
if it's in the syslog forwarding, you can definitely pull it.
If not, I could probably forward it off, correlate.
yeah, I can see that.
Okay. Any more questions regarding user ID sources? Okay, go ahead and move on. So essentially when it comes to deploying user ID, these are the factors that can affect it. So things that we have to consider are network size, because I mean obviously the larger your network is, a user ID implementation for a one-site company is going to be a lot different than a multinational company that has offices in multiple countries. Okay, the other thing is the quantity of users. If there is a single site that has like 150,000 users, that's going to be different than a multinational site that has like 2,500 users globally. So I mean, you can kind of see there's different sliders that kind of affect everything. The other thing too is the type of devices. So again, going back to like if somebody's using like an Apple laptop or they have Chromebooks, I mean you're going to have to find a different source of user ID than LDAP, because those devices typically don't participate in LDAP.
Yep. I still haven't found anything that really does Linux all that well.
Yeah. For Linux, I think your best bet is probably Captain Portal.
Yep.
That's like the only guaranteed way to do it, because I'm pretty sure with Global Protect, I don't think we have
there's
no Global
official
Protect
client.
Yeah, there's not one for Linux. There's one for Apple, there's one for Windows, just nothing for Linux yet. So all you Linux guys out there complain real loud,
Yeah,
real
so
hard to
the two people
in this room.
Yeah, well, Josh fixed it though, because when I connect to the wireless,
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm getting Linux, but then if you're on your dock and you're not connecting to wireless, then you kind of don't have that.
yeah.
But there's always the captive portal.
Yep.
So we're going to default to
Yeah.
for a lot of it.
Yeah. So essentially, when it comes down to the main thing, if you're doing like user agent deployment and like a large AD infrastructure, we have standalone user ID agents, and we also have agentless. So agentless, I would recommend for like smaller environments where the AD server isn't really under a lot of stress. Whereas in a large deployment where there's, say you got your PDC, your backup PC, and then you've got like a bunch of read-only domain controllers and all these other sites, I would recommend installing like the user ID agents on like an adjacent VM that's close to that AD server. And the reason being is that that user agent is what will feed the firewall. Otherwise, the firewall has to make a bunch of WMI calls to all the devices that it sees traffic from, and that can get real chatty real quick. So the agent is definitely the better way to go.
In Panorama, in 8.0, Panorama can now actually function as a user ID redistribution point.
Yes.
Oh,
So-
wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So
Wow.
Because the thing we found with the user ID agent, even though we have a lot of domain controllers and we should be running the agent, is our Windows administrators don't understand why we need this and why they can't just uninstall it or something like that. So we have to run the agent list regardless. So that would
well,
kind
and
of
it's usually when you've got a bunch of small remote sites, it ends up being easier to deploy the agent list because the firewall is sitting by that domain controller that's local,
Exactly.
redistributed up to Panorama now, and then Panorama can actually distribute the user IDs to all of the other sites without having the WAN traffic impact.
I personally haven't done the Panorama deployment yet for user ID aggregation, but that's definitely on my list of things to do.
If you need a test bench, what can we do?
kind of like
It makes
looking at that.
It makes Panorama, so Panorama is now, if you're doing enforcement though, Panorama now becomes a critical part of your network because you're distributing user ID across it.
Yeah.
So it's no longer I can just go
reboot it when it's acting funny.
correct.
Or
You need to have, yes, you need to go with HA because it's critical. Because I know a lot of people don't do HA of Panorama despite feedback's recommendations because I can just reboot it, whatever. It's just configuration. If it's down, it just means I don't manage my firewalls for a couple minutes, whatever.
Well, now it does.
Correct.
So,
So-
I actually do have one thing that I'm thinking about here. So if you do have Low Protect, right, and it connects to the internal gateway, it will
Right.
update that firewall, right?
It'll update the firewall that hosts that gateway, yes.
Correct. But let's say in our BGP setup, that firewall has a problem and is down.
I have,
And they then route.
or I have the user ID collector enabled on all of them.
Okay. Because then if it would go to a different firewall to the internet that it didn't have the internal gateway checked initially on, it would not know who it was. But if Panorama was redistributing it, that firewall would then know. I checked into the internal gateway, and the fact that all the other firewalls are connected to that same Panorama instance, they would all then know. Because that would be great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And that's a fantastic use case for it too.
Yeah.
You just described like one of the best ones. So.
All the more reason to get Panorama to 8.
Yeah. All right. Any questions so far on factors that affect user ID? All right. So moving on to App ID. So one of the big confusing topics for new Palo Alto customers is the concept of App ID versus traditional port and protocol based firewalls. So App ID is not just ports and protocols, and essentially, I'm including this link right here. So this is a link to the live community, and it walks you through the process of creating a custom App ID. Now the reason I'm linking this is because I think that you will really get a good appreciation for what App ID is really doing if you have to make your own signature. Okay, and just walking through that process. So I'll also make this PowerPoint available to everyone too, so you'll all have a clickable version of that link. So essentially, what App ID is, it uses ports and protocols, but that's only one component of what it's doing when it analyzes traffic. So every time a packet comes into the firewall, okay, it does a deep packet inspection. Now, Palo Alto has developed a bunch of signatures for applications. Okay, so say I'm analyzing the TCP header of this particular data stream, and I'm seeing that it's always making a call to example.com, and it's always doing it on a specific range of ports, and there's always some specific unique string in there. So we can make a signature based on that information and combine that with the best known ports and protocols for the actual application. And we can make a signature that will identify it as that application. App ID is not perfect, but it's way better than just relying on ports and protocols.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it's not perfect is because of application dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like for instance, say I have a firewall. It's a greenfield deployment, and I make one rule. Okay, because I want to make sure that anything that's browser-based traffic, I want to identify that. So I make one firewall rule, and that is allow any, and the app ID is web browser.
For like social media or a group for cloud storage, because we don't want everyone getting access to that.
Right.
Typically, those apps require web browsing SSL. So if you have your cloud storage up here and your sticker down here, web browsing SSL, they can be hitting your cloud storage because it's allowing your web browser or SSL to the internet. Like everyone's hitting that. So what we ended up doing was shrinking down the URL categories. So we said web browsing SSL URL category storage.
Right.
And that way, it matched the SSL of the web browser, but it didn't match the URL category. So that way, the one beneath it is web browser URL, but it's not on storage. And the one beneath that. So you could really take it a step further with the URL categories on top of the app IDs.
Yes.
Because otherwise, you're sitting there saying, why is everyone hitting the wrong rule? And it could be because your URL category is being
Where they're in both groups and it's hitting the one before the other, and then you change the rule order, and then it breaks it.
Yeah, so
The
it's almost
inverse
like
of that for everyone else.
So you could literally create like an app group of all the social media apps that are going to be used, and then just say URL category social media, and then that's what it is.
You bring up a good point, because that's actually something I forgot to include in here. So we can actually make application groups, or you have the capability of making an application group. So if you encounter a scenario like that where you do want to, just allow a subset of users to access a specific group of applications, you can make that app group and filter it down with all the parameters like he was just talking about.
Plus, if it includes like SSL web browser, you have to be careful because people can hit that. You're not supposed to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I've also been playing around the application filters, so I'd say like, I don't want to block all social media, but I only want to hit the ones that are risk 4 and risk 5 or known vulnerabilities. So also have fun with that.
All right, any questions so far? The water is kind of muddy, or?
We're not.
It just gets really complicated. Like, once you
can.
work with this a lot, like after a long time looking at it, you're like, okay, it makes sense now, but I can see it.
Yeah, it definitely takes practice, and again, like that's where the 6 Ps come in. You gotta prepare for it. You gotta read about it, understand how it functions, And once you get like a basic understanding, it becomes a lot easier to think. So the other thing too, like you were talking about rule order earlier. So understand that the firewall processes rules in a top-down fashion. Okay, so the first, yep, just like any other firewall on the market, it's a first match basis.
Or when you're talking to a vendor and say, allow this to be your firewall, you have to ask them what application, and they scratch their head.
I think
and
so.
say,
What you're talking about.
Port 50,000?
Yeah, it's just
Like,
at this TCP port.
Yeah, so it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, so what applications, and they typically don't understand. So that's another thing to get through as well, is because there's a lot of applications has to be updated as well.
Yeah.
And we found that you can just go and search, and they actually have an application for whatever thing they're trying to get through the firewall. Like I've seen crazy ones that you would never expect, like even games,
Yeah.
like World of Warcraft or whatever. And it's really interesting how, some applications have unique signatures and they end up in the application groups.
So a good resource to use if you ever want to see the Palo Alto Networks application ID database, it's called applopedia.paloaltonetworks.com. And I don't have a link to it in the presentation, but I can definitely add it. Yes?
I'm all for understanding stuff, and I've worked a little with this, but can't you take a packet capture and send it to support and they'll make you a custom app?
You can
ID?
actually request an app ID. If you take a PCAP and you're not quite sure how to make a custom app ID, then they will make them for you. But the thing is, like, there's going to be some turnaround time on that. So, I mean, if you're okay with the turnaround time, then by all means submit it to support. But if it's something you need like yesterday, it's still a good idea to go through that exercise and just kind of figure out how to do it yourself. Because the more empowered you are as a firewall admin, the more you can do, and the less you have to rely on others for figuring things out.
Yeah.
So I guess also to point to that, so let's say I did create an app rule and it's successful. If I submit that, will Palo Alto take a look? But like, yeah, you pretty much have it. Let's just add it to the global database.
I think so. I don't know if there's like an official channel to submit things like that, but I'm sure that.
So here's what I can tell you about submitting stuff. Something like that. If you've got something like that, let me know and we can try and submit it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you are going to submit a packet capture and you're going to request an application or an app, we want to know basically the packet capture. What is this app doing? It needs to be an app that's going to be something that a lot of users would do. So like some kind of commercially available product or website that's available that a lot of different customers would do it. Then, like Tom said, there is going to be turnaround time. A lot of turnaround time in some cases I've seen. So it's not an immediate process unless there's like a critical business need for something. So I know there's cases where we've had healthcare systems that are running Epic and wanted Epic app IDs, and we're like, okay, we'd love for you guys to give us some kind of Epic QA test dev stuff so we can create these app IDs that are all over the place. And customers don't submit all the various different pieces that they do, so it takes us a really long time to be able to pull those various different sub-functions that Epic signatures might be doing, which I said that because we just released an Epic app finally. So that's number one. Number two is you guys, if you need something and it's a custom app and it's required to do it, you can get services, so you can pay Tom or somebody like Tom to come and actually write that app ID for you.
Yep.
Or you can do it yourself following the links that he's got up there. Is the kind of the ways that you go about getting app IDs.
Yeah, we do have app ID creation, custom app ID creation as a professional services SKU. So if that's something that's interesting to you guys, then talk to them or whoever your SE is, and they can make the arrangements.
I would definitely suggest using these apps because you don't want to go back to your traditional port-based firewall. Because why did you buy a next-gen firewall if you're not going to use the app ID? It's pretty much going back in time to do the ports and source destination IDs.
Exactly.
That's why whenever Josh and I get a ticket in to build a new policy, we always use app ID, and we never ever use ports ever.
Yeah.
It's just not how we do it.
And I quit trying to explain this to outside vendors. So I open this port, I'm like, oh yeah, I made all the changes you told me to. Why don't you try it out? And I'm like, okay, there's the app. And
Yeah, sure, that's another thing.
Bugs. Okay, I built the rule. Well, I'll try it again. I just adjusted something.
Yeah, so that's another thing. If you just try it and see what apps are hit in your logs and were denied, then you just add that to your
That's literally the best way to do it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you want to start really small with this, create an app ID that's tied just to your user. affect anyone but you.
Yeah.
And then you can see, okay, I'm going to Google, it's not working because this, you build your app group up, and then before you know it, okay, maybe I'll get 4 or 5 people to test this out now. Then everyone uses the internet differently, but then you just kind of expand that group out until you're, okay, we got a good footprint, let's put some actual non-IT users in here. And you can just do that AD group or just individual users. You can get really granular with testing this stuff out.
Well, Tom can talk about using the migration tool to help do this process.
Yes.
But like, for people who aren't using app IDs, or you're like, I can't put app ID into this, one of the kind of recommended ways, if you're going to do it manually, is you go ahead and you create another, you've got your rule that's just port and protocol based rules. You create an app ID rule in front of it, and you say, okay, here's actually the applications that I see matching this. You're going to put that rule right above it and add an app ID. You leave the other rule in place. So your traffic, you're not going to break your traffic, but you've now got a rule that's an app ID based rule in place. You can continue to look at the logs as things are coming through and see if there's another application that's hitting that rule set that you didn't expect there, and then you can move it up. Eventually you get to the point where you should be able to disable that port and protocol based rule, and then after another while you can delete it because you know it's not going to affect anything. It's kind of the manual, take a little bit longer, be super cautious process.
But it's the best. That's how I've always done it ever since I started working at Palo Alto. Is just limit the subset of who it's going to affect. Try to clone any legacy rules that you have, and just make it a game. I don't ever want to see anything hit the old rule. Once I have every app ID, every user category, every URL category, where nothing ever hits your safety net, then you know you're good. So,
Is that ID required for the IDS IPS stuff?
No.
No. So moving on, this is just an example of a rule that has app ID enabled. So remember I was talking about dependencies earlier? So I've got Office 365, but say for this particular rule, I also need to enable SSL and web browsing because my users are going to be accessing Office 365 through the browsers. Okay, so not necessarily a dependency, but they will need those if they're going to utilize that specific functionality of Office 365. The other thing too is, even though we have app ID still can refer to like the service, which is it's our terminology for port protocol. So by default, we use application default for app IDs. And what that means is that if you go to Applepedia.paloaltonetworks.com and you find an app ID for a specific application, you're going to see that it's going to use either like TCP or UDP or both, and it's going to have like a specific range of ports that we know it to run on. If you have an application, though, say somebody is running like SSH, but they're running it on like a high port, for instance, we'll be able to identify, hey, that's SSH, but wait a minute, it's not adhering to application default, block it. So that's where like the service can come into play with app ID. So you'll notice there's also an option for any, and you can also select. So if you want to assign like a custom range of ports or a custom port to a particular application, you can do that here. Now, this can get kind of frustrating.
yes, it can.
It can get very, very frustrating if you've ever had to deal with this. And if you try to do it in production without like any kind of testing or anything like that, I don't recommend doing that.
You'll
But-
break your verbal function.
Yeah, you can break a lot of traffic with this. So make sure that you follow that methodology. Like Ben was saying earlier, that's actually a professional services best practice, is to do that kind of rule sandwich methodology. Where whenever we do a migration, we always like to do what's called a like for like migration. Because essentially, if we like say you're coming off of a Cisco ASA, okay, there's nothing but port protocol rules on that. So we migrate all that, so now there's a bunch of port protocol rules on the Palo Alto. You are in no worse of a security posture than you were prior to acquiring the Palo Alto Networks hardware. We just want to make sure that when it comes time to actually swing over traffic to that you have the same user experience that you had with your old equipment. Once it's in play, then we can start slowly turning on some of these, more advanced features. So lesson number 2, and it kind of goes into lesson number 1. You actually mentioned this point on the very first slide. Test everything. Test it, test it, test it. Because at the end of the day, your guys' jobs are all about the end user experience. If you've got unhappy users, you're going to have unhappy IT people because they're just going to be calling you up all the time, making requests. Hey, I need you to fix this. I mean, you want to make the end user experience as smooth and easy as humanly possible.
Because you don't want an unhappy boss, because then that comes to an unhappy unemployment.
Exactly. An unhappy pink slip. So, for user ID, one of the tests, okay, remember there's visibility and enforcement for user ID. Always do a visibility test first. And you can typically just let this one run, okay, because essentially you're not blocking or restricting based on the user ID at this point. So, always do that before trying to do any kind of enforcement. I make a point here, inaccurate user ID in the log with visibility, it's a minor inconvenience. In production, it's a support cost. So the one thing I will say is some points of caution. You want to keep an eye on the total quantities of the user IDs being seen by the firewall, because based on the hardware platform, there's actually a limit of how many IP user mappings there are. Off the top of my head, I know the number's fairly high. I think on like the 5000 series and above, it's like 512,000 user ID to IP mappings. But for group mappings, okay, you can map AD groups to users. There's a soft cap of 10,000 per group, and I don't think that's changed in anything yet. So that's actually an issue that I've run into beforehand. I've had a customer who had AD groups that had like 17,000 users in them, and we tried to do the group mapping. We run the command, show IP user group mapping, and boom, there's only 10,000 people there. It's like, what's going on here? Come to find out, there's a soft limit. So if your AD infrastructure has more than 10,000 users in a single group, consider breaking that down a little bit. Or make a group within a group. So the enforcement test, typically you have done a visibility test before this. So make sure that the group mappings are functioning correctly, and make sure that as far as you can tell, the user ID information is accurate. Test things like running an application as someone else. Okay, if you start to see that, oh wait a minute, now that new user ID for like the admin who ran the command prompt as admin, now that's in the database now, and even though the user is using their computer into their account, I'm seeing that user ID mapping. If you see things like that, chances are you don't want to necessarily do enforcement yet, until you know for sure that that information is accurate. So for app ID testing, it should only be implemented after some level of traffic profiling has been done. So if it's like a greenfield deployment, and you don't really know exactly what's going through your network at this time, we can do a couple of things. We can either set up a test unit and run it in tap mode. So essentially the tap interface is, you're going to set up, it's basically just going to see everything that goes through the firewall, and just like, it's like an any allow rule. With that in place, we actually get some log data, and we can see app IDs, we can see IP mappings, who's accessing what, direction of traffic flow. But if it comes from migration, we can leverage the migration tool to create the rule base and start doing some app ID implementation. So what you see here is just a screenshot from the migration tool. This one is version 3, and there's actually a new version of the migration tool coming out soon. It's not official yet, it's currently in beta. I'm actually beta testing it. It's pretty nice. But essentially, you can connect your Palo Alto devices to the migration tool. So here, I've added my VM50, and it's running on 8.0.3. So here, this just shows you what all information that you need when you connect the device. What you'll see here, there's an API key. When you connect it with the credentials, I left that blank on purpose. It'll actually generate an API key that you can use to make API calls to the firewall. And the migration tool will do just that. So the other thing you want to do once you get your firewall connected to the migration tool is you want to create what's called a log connector. Okay, so from the migration tool, you're going to see that little navigation bar up there. You want to click on the one that looks like some beakers, and that'll take you to the log connector profiles. You want to add the connector, and then you give it a name, but then you select the device. This dropdown will populate with the firewalls that you've added to the migration tool. Filter by vsys, so if your firewall has multiple virtual systems, you can filter based on whichever vsys that you want to read the logs from. And you give it a time period. Typically, we say last 30 days, because if you've been gathering data, or your firewall's been in place for 30 days after cutover, we're going to have a pretty good smattering of traffic that's gone through there. So once you've done that, once you have that data, you can have it pull the config from the firewall, and you'll see all the rules that are currently there. So what you can do, you can right-click on a rule, doesn't matter which one. You you go to app ID adoption, and then you can click on this, retrieve apps for all rules. If your rule base is very large, it could crash the migration tool, because I mean, it's just like a VM with limited resources. But typically, if you have like less than like 1,000 rules or so, it'll be able to handle it. So what you're going to see when you do that, it's going to add a new column to what's being displayed. And in that column, it will show you all the applications that have been identified by the traffic that has hit that rule. So when it comes to app ID adoption, this is a fantastic tool to actually give you an idea of what kind of rules to make for those, to replace those service rules. So again, Ben already mentioned this earlier, so I don't necessarily need to go through that again. You want to make the app ID rules above the standard port protocol rules, and that'll allow the traffic to go through. Because if it's already hitting the service rules, then it's going to hit them even if the app ID rule is incorrect. But the app ID, once you get to the point where you've got the app ID rule tuned, and you don't see any more traffic hitting that port protocol rule, then you can typically safely disable that port protocol rule, and then like after a while you can delete it. So again, this is just kind of an overview of what I just said. The one thing I do want to mention though, is what you will see, sometimes we can't always identify the application in the traffic stream. Occasionally you're going to see things like unknown TCP and unknown UDP. Now that can be for a couple of different reasons. Either A, it's like a custom in-house application that the Palo Alto Network's app ID database has never seen before. Or B, we didn't get enough information out of the data stream to identify the application accurately. So I think we need the first 7 bytes of a TCP handshake in order to accurately identify an application. So if we don't get that, you'll also see incomplete or unknown, I think sometimes. Yeah.
Does this mean the application didn't work when you get those?
It doesn't mean the application didn't work, it just means that we weren't able to successfully identify it. So for instance, if you have a rule that allows a particular application, say somebody is on like a real spotty connection and they try to make like a couple of TCP handshakes but not all the packets make it through, it's going to show up as unknown or unidentified, or it could be unknown TCP or unknown UDP, and then it will just drop the connection if you have like the rule to deny it.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying.
It would block traffic.
Yeah. When you see that, what they were trying to do didn't work.
Right.
Not necessarily. So unknown TCP and unknown UDP could mean it's just unknown. It's not been identified right now.
Oh, okay, right.
If you see like incomplete or there's another one.
I think it's unknown.
No, it's not unknown. It's incomplete or something else. There's another one that basically means, hey, like the session did not make it through. There wasn't enough
data.
Insufficient data. That's the one I'm looking for.
Yep.
Yeah, insufficient data means that enough of it didn't get through. That's usually when you don't see full 7 of that, or the full 7 bytes to be able to establish what the app is.
Right.
Incomplete means usually the TCP handshake didn't finalize, so it wasn't able to do that. And unknown typically means that it did finalize and there was enough information, but we didn't recognize it. Maybe it was encrypted, maybe it was, who knows what, maybe it's a custom thing. It's something completely different. It's an attack or an evasion, something like that. So best practice is you want to get rid of anywhere where there's unknown TCP and unknown UDP.
Exactly. So if you see a lot of unknown TCP and unknown UDP, typically you can just filter the logs for unknown TCP and unknown UDP, and then you can get a profile of what IP addresses are initiating those connections, which ones are receiving it. And if you got user ID enabled, you can see who's doing it. If you notice that it's like all the same port, you can typically just make like a port-based rule to even block it if you know it's not like a line of business application, or if it is a legit line of business application, then you can make the port rule to allow it. But ideally, this is where you would want to do a PCAP and see if you can either make the custom signature yourself, or if you need to enlist Palo Alto, we can help you do that.
Yeah, because very commonly an attack will come in as an unknown app because it's an attack.
Yes. The best practice is to make a block rule for unknown TCP and unknown UDP. You typically do not want to allow it. And if you make that rule and you start to notice, okay, I've got this in-house application that's just not working, then you might want to start poking some holes, at least temporarily, just to allow that.
I kind of find you allow that, and you keep things running, especially if it's like an internal thing.
Yeah.
It's not going outside, then it's pretty safe to. But then again, you always.
If it's going east-west, you're probably okay, but if it's going north-south, then you got issues. So the third lesson and this one primarily applies to application ID, okay? beware application override. Okay, so have you guys ever had to use application override, or are you familiar with what it does? So remember earlier I showed you the flow logic diagram. What do you notice happens before application ID happens? The application override policy takes place. Okay? So an application override it's like an object that you can create to override a Palo Alto Networks app ID with your own custom ports. And for instance, if you do that, there's very few instances where I would actually recommend doing it, but occasionally like a scenario lines up where you have to do it. It happens before the actual application ID, but what it does once an application override policy is identified, it puts the traffic on a fast path network processor, which means it bypasses app ID and content inspection. So if you've got security profiles like antivirus or anti-spyware or vulnerability detection, if you're trying to make use of all those features, they will not work on an application override rule, because you are explicitly telling the firewall, I want this application to use these ports. Okay, this is what the application really is. I know better than you, Palo Alto. That's basically what an application override is.
I can't think of when we've been doing the app ID for the longest time. I can't think of the time where we've had to do that.
It's very rare, but I have seen like a couple other SEs or PSEs who've had to do that. It's very, very rare though. So the big red text here, application override assumes you know exactly what you're doing, and you probably don't. So try not to do it unless you know for sure. I absolutely 100% cannot get around this application ID. I need to make an override rule to make this traffic pass my network.
So an example, I have got an example of that. There is a customer I was working with who has a specific, I think it was either Telnet or SSH policy, that they had to have a different TCP timeout value specifically for that,
Yes.
for just specifically this certain application, but they didn't want it to apply to everything else. So they didn't want to say all the Telnet timeouts or all SSH sessions are going to last for 5 hours, but they needed this one to last for 5 hours because the app had to support that. And there was no other way to do this other than doing an app ID override.
Now that you mentioned session timeout, that is like one of the main reasons I see people do application override, because essentially what you'll run into a lot, at least what I see in the field, some companies will have like these legacy applications that were developed and they were developed poorly. So if they open up a session to, like say you got like a client opening up a connection to a server, or you got like server to server connection, there is no session timeout value in the original coding of that application. But by default, we'll have like a session timeout value of like 24 hours or whatever the period is that's default. That session will terminate, and then say this like server-to-server communication is doing like a big data transfer, it'll kill that session, stopping that data transfer, and then whoever is the app owner will have to restart that. It's almost always in-house applications where you see application override rules, and I don't recommend doing an app override rule unless you can absolutely not avoid it. I would market the application developers to say, dude, just put some limits on your session timeouts or reinitiate a session. It's a couple lines of code. It's not that bad.
Or learn how to program code
Well,
properly.
I mean, so the other example, you can't always change that as much as you want to. It's nice to say that, but you can't change
You
it.
can't always,
And my other example was when I was an end user at Mount Union, World of Warcraft was actually doing all their updates over BitTorrent. So we were blocking BitTorrent because I didn't want spam with DCMA violations, but we had to allow World of Warcraft to update via BitTorrent. So I had to do an app override for BitTorrent over this specific port that World of Warcraft was using. So that's like another example where you have to override what it's doing, because it was legitimately BitTorrent traffic that this is what it was.
Right.
But I was blocking that, and I couldn't block it because I needed this to not be BitTorrent, but to be World of Warcraft traffic.
You run into a lot of gray areas when it comes to firewall
Yeah.
rules. So I mean, there's the nutshell version of what I'm saying here. To avoid it if you can, do it if you have. So at that stage, I mean, those are pretty much like the main lessons that I've learned. I know I've taken up some time here, but it's been good so far. I mean, there's been a lot of audience interaction here. Do you guys have any questions for me based on things I've covered so far? And I remember you had a question about software as a service.
Well, I guess if we were looking at app ID and user served like the SaaS report, looking to see if we could control things more that way than having to go to a CASB or something like that.
Has anyone told you about Aperture yet?
Yes.
Okay. So with Aperture, you can actually use that to restrict access to cloud applications. You can also get a lot of control through that, because essentially what will happen is the firewall will have direct API tie-ins to whatever that the cloud application is. So if it's like Box or GitHub or whatever your organization uses, Aperture can be leveraged to kind of manage that. If you want more information on it, I mean, we can.
We'll get to that. He's wanting to commit to do a demo on it and stuff, so.
If that's your goal, I'd highly recommend that.
Okay. No problem. Any other specific questions regarding user ID or app ID or anything along those lines? No? All right, well with that, I want to thank you all for giving me your time today. If you guys all remember this moment, this is when Jeb Bush said, "Please clap" when giving a campaign speech. And this was the actual closed caption after he said that. Thank you all for your time.